Well, we're streaming right now. I'm gonna see.
Oh, we be live. Let's go.
This is live. This is live on YouTube right now, and we're gonna see if we get the link.
We hope we get the link.
We hope we
so
get
then
it.
People can join us.
It says it's unlisted. Start sending us your video from streaming software to go live. I think I did that.
Is this mic blocking my face? Let's see right there.
Maybe.
This is our first time
Uh-oh.
using the PBJ Presidio
got-
Bitcoin Studio
I don't
for
even know if
Nostr
it's
News.
on.
Well, that would be a bit of a buzzkill. I might try
March
moving.
27th. Start sending us.
I'm gonna close my laptop for now. Get a bit more.
I don't know if this is working. It may be. It may be on. It may. Oh, Alex is telling us it looks good.
Oh, we're live.
Well, I don't know. I can't see the link. I don't know. I'm sure it's there somewhere, but we are we just like upgraded our whole experience here.
I can look for you.
You know, like when you go pro, like we've always been hood, right?
We're still hood.
We're still hood. But we were super hood. We were just doing whatever, right? We were going out, we were doing our walks
That's right.
and taking walks and talking Nostr and just kind of catching up. And then we got this beautiful studio built out. But
It's definitely a step in the right direction.
with all of the beauty comes some complexity. We are, not official video producers. We don't really, know what we're doing. So we're sort of winging it, figuring it out as we go along. So do you have a link? Can you make sure that,
I got the link.
can you share a link out?
I just
Oh,
shared
here,
it on
Alex.
Nostr. Yep, and
Alex shared it
on
out.
Twitter as well.
Okay, so I'm going to get this out. 'cause I
We're
think
figuring all this out live.
We
so
wanna-
bear with us.
we want to do this on zap.stream too.
Yeah, we said soon TM 2
And
weeks.
we're going to get there. But it's going to be, oh, good. Somebody's actually shared it out. Okay, P2X, thank you. Yes. All right, I'm going to make sure that when people are asking, okay, Carnage was asking, got a link. Let's hit him with the link. Sorry. We,
I almost said we're going live with David Bailey. Definitely not tonight. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve.
we will get this stuff flowing. Because I think we actually have some good stuff to catch up on. It's been
It's been a long
a
time.
long time. Oh, look, we're actually out on X now too.
Fuck yeah, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Liminal. What's up, man? I see you in the chat.
Oh yeah.
Liminal's he's a
been a
great thinker.
minute.
Someone I've been meaning to hit up. I know we're overdue for a chat as well. So
Awesome.
so we're live,
I think it's
and
good.
I think we got all the links out. So yeah, as DK was saying, we used to be super hood. Now we're like big timers, hood rich. We got a nice studio somehow, but still figuring out all the pieces, and that's okay.
Yeah, we were doing this out of my like extra closet.
Yeah.
Right. I think years ago. Was it years?
It's been years.
It's been
man.
years ago.
like 2 years.
And
Like,
then
ever
we were-
since Nostr exploded in like December 23.
23, I think.
Or was
Yeah.
it 22?
Yeah.
I don't know. Time
Yeah,
since COVID
something
is very
23. So
fluid.
we're like a year and a half.
No, more than that.
More than that. 2 years.
Yeah, because Nostrika, we
it
started
been?
before Nostrika, right? And that was 2 years
I would say
ago.
Jan 23.
Jan 23.
So probably
2
2
years and some change. Yeah. Jinx.
And I feel like we kind of have like we started playing in my closet, just doing our thing, and then we were doing our walking pods, and that was fun.
The walking pod was great. We should never get rid of that entirely.
I'm
We
not
should
trying to
bring
get rid
that
of
back.
it. No,
Yeah.
and we're in the same spot actually, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But now we've been fortunate to have this whole Presidio Bitcoin thing come together
That's right.
around all of the stuff we were kind of doing anyway, and other people have been doing.
Yeah.
So organically, all this energy that's just kind of been happening bubbles up.
Oh, yeah.
All these people came in and said, "Hey, let's make this a thing." Right?
Absolutely.
So obviously, like, props to Steve for really driving it. Props to we had some great big donors from Ventus and Mark
Yeah.
who've contributed to making this whole place great. And I think most people who know of Nostr Talks or Nostr News and kind of the stuff we've been doing,
It's a big audience.
they may not. Well, it's not that big. It's being funny,
Facetious.
but maybe they may not have even heard of Presidio Bitcoin
Yeah.
yet. So, do you want to give a little bit of
Yeah, absolutely. So, I
bit of
mean,
intro on what this is all about?
I mean, for years, we have collectively, myself, David, Steve, many people have wanted a place for the Bitcoin community to do stuff in San Francisco. And it seemed almost criminal that San Francisco has historically been the center of all kinds of technology, wave after wave, the internet. And it was in many ways the sort of epicenter of Bitcoin development prior to the block size wars. So prior to, 2017. And post block size wars, I think a lot of people know sort of what happened. San Francisco, sadly, went kind of full shitcoin. Massive funds were raised here, massive amounts, billions of dollars were deployed, and I think we're still waiting on any products. And so that was a bit of a disappointment. But at the end of the day, there was so much talent. I mean, Lalu from Lightning Labs was here, Danny from DZ was here. Like some of the best builders in the space were definitely still here, but it's very diffuse. I mean, people were in the East Bay, people were South Bay, and so. Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, we've all been saying, wouldn't it be awesome if we had a place? And then,
And there's these places out there that we can kind of model after, right? Like
Yeah.
what Bitcoin Park is doing
That's right.
in
Nashville.
and I think Pleb Lab
in
in
Austin.
And
Yeah.
there's like examples. I think Chain Code has some of this in New York.
Yep.
Are they the biggest example in New York?
I think
to
Chain Code is
highlight?
definitely a great example. I actually haven't been there myself.
Okay.
I think maybe a little less public facing and more
Okay.
for like the core devs and certain contributors. I think they have PubKey maybe is a bit more public facing. And I would say what we're doing is something kind of in the middle. But yeah,
It's nice that it's like every town kind of comes together around their own thing and
Totally.
makes it their own way.
Yes.
Right. And it's not like a way to do the per city or a way to do the Bitcoin thing in your town. It's more just like everybody comes together in their own community and figures out how we want to do
And
it.
there's no question that like the amount of innovation, opportunity, idea exchange, like it's just everything is better in person. And I will say, as a VC, it was cool at first, investing internationally and all over. And I'm, still glad that I was able to do that. Awesome opportunities around
Yeah.
the world. I love that Bitcoin is so global and not centered. But just doing Zoom calls gets so exhausting. It's just not as much fun. But being able to actually like sit there and jam with people like we do in
Yeah.
person with companies you work with, it's just for me, at least with my personality type, is so energizing. And yeah, so I'm really grateful we had this space. And one of my hopes for this space is, right now it's obviously very Bitcoin focused, Bitcoin centric, which is great. But we don't yet have a ton of sort of Nostr builders.
Mhm.
And, for many reasons, obviously the Nostr community is very intrinsically aligned with Bitcoin. I hope, and one of my goals is to see more Nostr startups, FOSS developers
Mhm.
coming and setting up here. And I'm open through HiveMind to figuring out, potentially if there's folks that, want to, on the open source side, get a seat here. I'm open to talking to folks about doing that. And would love to see more startups, So if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I either live in the San Francisco Bay Area or, maybe I should live in San Francisco because now there's a space to hang and hack on, Nostr stuff. I would be super stoked on that.
Do we know any? So I think about when we took that trip to the first Nostr kind of
Mhm.
conference in
Costa Rica,
right?
yeah.
And I think when we went there, it felt like everybody came from somewhere else. I almost felt like most of the Nostr energy was outside the U.S., let alone outside San Francisco, right?
100%.
And I wonder, like, do we know a core of people already who are here in San Francisco that are kind of already pretty Nostr adjacent or understand?
Definitely. I
what
mean,
it's all
there's a handful. And I would say, obviously Bob and Damien are here and they're already working out the space, which is
Yep.
great. And they're, they were very, very Nostr focused. Now have been a bit more sort of eCash focused, but still Nostr adjacent. I mean, look, anyone in the Bitcoin space, I think every single person when I asked at we did a live Presidio Bitcoin Jam, which is our other podcast, which we'll talk more
Right,
about.
right.
Where we've been doing much more with our buddy Steve Lee from Spiral rather than doing Nostr News. But I think everyone said they'd play with Nostr. So I think everyone in the community, I would be shocked if anyone has not tried Nostr yet.
Yep.
But in terms of people who are really building products and services around Nostr, Bob is the main one that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I feel like Nostr doesn't yet have enough understanding among the tech community. So one of the things that I hope kind of having a space and just having people buy, like the other day I had actually a friend of Shazan's. So Shazan's building Lava, obviously.
Yeah.
A friend of his came by who's kind of a generalist VC, not particularly Bitcoin or crypto focused. He is a Bitcoiner. He really understands Bitcoin, but
Right.
from his day job investing, he doesn't really do much of any of this. And I asked him if he'd heard of Nostr. He'd not even heard of it.
Really?
And I explained it to him, and I'd say, like, came away very skeptical of like a social media use case, which is like, I think, fine to be skeptical of. But then when I sort of described it to him, I wasn't really pitching it as like a social media or like censorship resistant social media. I was sort of explaining, it's sort of like just a public messaging system that nobody controls. And it's not necessarily about playing status games or kind of what people think of social media for, but it may be something more like the Swift, messaging network to pair along with Bitcoin as the actual settlement network for payments. And that kind of that made a light bulb trip in his mind where he was like,
It's cool.
oh yeah, of course something like this makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like there's, you know, Nostr's so like, in a sense, it's abstract. And I think the more that people kind of get attached to one flavor of what you can do with a public messaging infrastructure, like you can do a social media thing, that works, that's cool. Like I'm glad people are doing that. And
Right.
I like hanging around the water cooler and talking to people in that way. But I think it's more like a bunch of technology kind of like building blocks.
Definitely.
And the fact that you could use it for something like public messaging
Yep.
is sort of, I think that resonates with me. And when I said it to him, his eyes lit up. And he's like, yes, of course. So I feel like, you know, as a community of people who care about Nostr, I feel like if we can evolve the messaging to help people, you know, see it in different ways. Like
I agree.
It's in a sense, it's easy to dismiss the social media use case. I'm not dismissing it, but I think it's easy for somebody who doesn't really care or pay too much attention, just looking for like the next interesting
Yeah.
thing. I think it's easy to dismiss that, but I think once it gets framed as a public, you know, a public messaging resource that nobody controls, that's, I think, much more interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And on the messaging front, I don't know if you saw this, but I put out an essay last year, almost exactly a year ago. It's probably time for a refresh of it, called Nostr's Identity for the Internet. And so I would say the messaging system, but specifically for me, the way I pitch to people is it's a public identity system where anyone can roll their own identity and no one can control it. You don't need a state, you don't need a corporation. It's open like Bitcoin, right? And very, very similar sort of on the principle side of that. But to me, I think, you know, I've been sharing that, and perhaps this VC would like to read that with a lot of my more mainstream tech friends, and it's kind of gone off with them. We're like, oh yeah, it totally makes sense that we need an identity layer for the web. It also totally makes sense if that identity layer is not going to get captured and like owned by a corporation. Like today, the identity layer for the web is controlled by like Google, Facebook, X.
Yep.
Those are the main, Apple, I guess, to a small degree, but those are the main ones. And I think everyone can see the value of owning an identity that you can bring with you to plug into a variety of different apps and being able to accrue and transfer reputation. I think there's no question. And so one thing that I would love to figure out how to do, I know we've got absolutely nothing else on our plates here that we're planning to do at the Presidio Bitcoin. We're laughing because we're planning an AI hackathon, and which is also going to be very Nostr related. But I think that, you know, just trying to get more, there's a lot of people around town who are interested in a decentralized identity system. And who just don't see Nostr as a solution. Like I went to an event at the Internet Archive, which is super cool. If anyone's ever in San Francisco, it's like this amazing church to the open web, I would say. Literally, it's in a physical church, and it's so cool.
And those are the people who run archive.org.
Yeah,
right? That's kinda what
archive.org.
they're most famous for, maybe?
In the Wayback Machine.
Yep.
And, you know, really like just really cool organization. And it's a little frustrating because at the event, you know, they were there being sponsored by like Filecoin and IPFS, and it's like, oh God, here we go. Anyway, so all that to say though, but a lot of these people are natural allies, and I think are quite smart. And if they saw, you know, the potential of what an open identity system, and then paired with something like, for example, what Stu and Hazard have been working on with the, what do you call them? The Blossom servers, right? The ability to have, you know, that kind of media storage. I think that's going to be super interesting to them. So yeah, anyways, a lot there.
And we should mention we do want to stream on Zap.stream.
Yes.
That's like a goal
soon.
both for anything that we do, like in our sort of traditional just kind of hang session, but also you know, this new show that we're doing with Steve. We've been doing it, I guess, since November. And that's called Presidio Bitcoin Jam, which is kind of like the three of us sort of covering like the news of the week, but it's not like news coverage so much. It's like we're learning about what's happening in the world. We're trying to like make sense of it and digest it. And we're not coming with a sort of, we're sharing our perspective on what we heard and what we think about it, but we're not necessarily saying we have the conclusion of it. It's more like real time thinking about that. But that we're going to be publishing that out to Zap.stream.
That's right.
But there's, you know, with all the beauty of like a, you know, a perfectly built out studio and stuff, we're actually well over our skis on our knowledge and ability to configure everything.
We're definitely not full-time podcasters.
So we have to,
we'll get there.
We'll get there, but it'll take maybe a little, some tries. But that'll be a good one. So if you're interested in the stuff that we've been doing here, you should go find the Presidio Bitcoin YouTube channel for now, and soon enough, the Presidio Bitcoin Nostr account, right?
That may even be live yet. I don't know. I haven't asked Alex.
And if we had a good naming system, I would point you right towards it. Presidio Bitcoin, but we don't have that yet. So
Another project that we are
So instead-
undertaking right now, thinking
instead,
about.
Max will now recite the NPub for the Presidio Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's in pub 420-6969-1337.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much to talk about, and it's been a long time since we've done this. You know, I think you made a really good point and I think this is maybe helpful perspective for all of us. I actually saw a great post from Gigi the other day being like, we made so much progress, but if you're so close to the metal, then, you know, it just can seem kind of like frustrating how slow it's going. And I think that's the case in any technological
kind of got to
industry.
zoom out and sort of get a lay of the land.
Totally. And like one of the areas I've been obsessed with recently, which maybe we'll get some time to cover at the end, is solar energy, which I used to work in full time in 2014. And also it was the kind of case where for many years I was so close to the metal, I was like, fuck, this should be going much faster. And then I zoom out, I'm like, holy shit, it just like disrupted everything. And I think Nostr is following a similar trajectory. But I do think there's been some, you know, I don't know, like people trying to dunk on Nostr, being like, oh, you guys are basically stuck at, you know, and first of all, our user numbers are not terrible by the traditional metrics of whatever, 40,000, 42,000 last couple of weeks, weekly actives, which again, always important to note that doesn't account for people that are just kind of like reading things, which is usually the majority of a service's users, a service like a Twitter, Reddit, whatever, and something around, I don't know, 20K or a little bit less daily actives. And so people have been dunking on that a little bit. I'm curious from your perspective, we've talked a lot about this idea that maybe one of the areas where Nostr is absolutely shining is with Nostr Wallet Connect. We're seeing a ton of adoption from tons of wallets. Obviously, you know, the early ones being Alby, but since Zeus has connected it, Bringin has done a lot. They've done some cool stuff with AI where you can like have euros and have an AI via Claude go out there and like buy stuff on your behalf. Very cool, all because of Nostr Wallet Connect. So we've seen a lot of cool stuff happening there, and that's using, as you said, sort of the Swift messaging layer for Bitcoin payments. So maybe that's like the first use case that really has, outside of social media, as the water cooler, really strong traction. What do you think? Is that the strongest use case right now? What is your general thoughts on the state of Nostr? Are there other use cases you're super excited about? Like, where do you think we are?
I feel like for the things, like when there's already kind of a technology layer that serves somebody's needs well, like doing something analogous with a slightly different value proposition is oftentimes a bit more of an uphill battle. And there are opportunities to do that and to serve new cohorts of users or people who like don't like the old way and want something new or feel like the old way doesn't quite serve them. But to me, like when I've seen technologies grow really fast, it's usually because there's something that like couldn't have been done before in the world. And it wasn't, it was a good idea, but it was also an idea that like was only recently available in the landscape of things that could be done.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the social media use case, I think we do have like, I think we have plenty of people. We have the water cooler feel. We have plenty of people who gather in that way and use those tools, and those are great. But I think like the really, you know, the really different things that like couldn't have been done before Nostr, the stuff that it kind of gets me most excited. And I think some of that is like, I mean, like obviously, you know, I've been doing a lot of this vibe coding stuff.
Yeah.
And
DK is now a full-time vibe coder. So I've heard.
But I've been messing with the tools a lot, and you can just accomplish so much so quickly. So if you actually know a bit about how software is built and deployed, you can accomplish 10 times more than you used to. And if you didn't have any kind of software skills, you can actually do stuff now, right? Without actually needing to learn to code. I think that's a big deal. Both like if you were empowered, you're now 10 times better. And if you weren't empowered, you're now empowered.
And could you maybe pause there for a minute? Because I've done a little bit of vibe coding, but it's been a minute. I saw Miles Suter was on here saying he's been vibe coding, his mind is blown. So maybe it's the revolution is sweeping Nostr. I need to play with it. But could you maybe break down what is the difference? So for a total noob, what does it enable versus what is that like extra 5% or whatever of knowledge that allows a really good engineer, like the context that they have that allows them to do something much better? And maybe give an example what that might look like.
Well, yeah, it's the difference between like, I guess I've been programming since I was a kid, and it's, you know, you sort of start with like a text editor and you just start like typing commands or, you know, a script or, you know, a language that, you know, the computer knows how to interpret.
Right.
So you're sort of you study, you read, you learn how to do these things so that you can speak to the computer in a way that you expect it can do something useful.
Right.
And it's, and that could be in, assembly language or C or C++ or, God forbid, Java.
Dating yourself here, DK.
And, or Python, in the modern world.
Better.
Rust if you're actually like a really good engineer.
Yeah.
But that's like always like a human trying to like adapt to understand how the machine talks so that you can accomplish something.
Right.
And that's been the only way that any software has been built for, forever, as long as software's been around, right? And so the big change here is you can create software from effectively a chat interface where you're writing a prompt about something you want to exist. And you can describe it the way you might describe it in your dreams. You don't have to adapt to understand how the computer learns and execute software. You actually can just do it in the way that you think about it. So you can say, hey, I want to, like, simple example, I want to make a tic-tac-toe game, but I want, the X's to be green and I want the O's to be yellow. And it'll do that. And it'll kind of do that like, one shot. Like you just do it.
That's sick.
And it works.
Yeah.
A very simple version. But I think it demonstrates that you can sort of take like what you might be familiar with, these sort of chat bots and LLMs, the ChatGPT and Claude and those types of tools, Google Gemini. There's a bunch of those that people probably use. But right now you use those mostly for like information. Like I have a question, I want to do some research, and I'm kind of prompting and asking for information. It's preparing information, giving that to me. That's kind of, vibe coding is kind of that feel, but instead of asking for information, you're asking for software.
Right.
And it's software that needs to be functional. Now, this actually works today, but it only works in like a small scale, and it's very broken in many ways, but it actually works.
Yeah.
So the thing that excites me about it is that it's not just like a, crazy hypothetical sci-fi, but also, I'll admit, it doesn't do everything.
Right.
It takes
Yet,
right? So today it takes some real understanding. Like you can't just prompt it like let's say a sophisticated, like I think, did Miles say did he publicly say this, or was this?
I know publicly he just said he vibe coded for an hour and had his mind blown.
Okay, but he actually built an app and was able to accomplish something substantial within that. But my guess is it's not because he just said like clone this app, but he kind of said, oh, make a component that does thing X.
Yeah.
Okay, now take that component and use it in a little bit more, compose it into something else, and then compose it into something else. So in a sense, if you're like already pretty comfortable with software, you have good instinct around how you want to build something with vibe coding.
You already have both like the scaffolding in mind and taste, I would say, right?
Yeah. It definitely requires taste and some like how do you break a problem down into its subcomponents and its pieces?
Right.
So if you say like, hey, just make a clone of Uber or something, it's going to get some of the UI right, but the whole thing is not going to work, right?
Yeah.
But if you say like, hey, like let's start with a map. Give me a map. Okay, we're going to build a marketplace that has drivers and riders, right? And then you kind of break the problem down like that.
Yeah, I got
and then you say, let's make a version of the app that's just for riders and have a login for riders. Now let's do one for drivers. In the riders one, let's collect this information. And the drivers one, let's collect this information. You just have to understand what you want it to do.
Got it.
But you have to specify it in much more detail than maybe the casual observer would imagine. Casual observer may just be like, make me a clone of Uber. And you're like, it's just not going to be good at that. But if you're like, break the problem down into the components, instead of futzing with like, HTML or JavaScript or CSS, or Swift or whatever tools, whatever languages you would typically use to accomplish whatever you're trying to do. Instead of like messing with that and like, what's the syntax and does it say pixel or PX or whatever? You don't mess with any of that, but you do have to specify it in a similar way. You just don't have to actually like get any of the syntax right. But I think it's good if you can think about breaking a problem down into its components.
Yeah.
And then sort of build those components, then build up and expand and expand and expand from there.
Totally.
So that's what like a professional software engineer can now do their work 10 times as fast.
Yeah.
And there's problems. It's not perfect, but like it's a very empowering tool in that way. Now, if you have no idea how to do any of this, you don't know what deployment are, what a staging test development servers are. You don't think about environments. You just like use apps.
Yeah.
You can do like a tic-tac-toe, which you couldn't have done before, right? Like you can literally just prompt it and it'll work. But, you know, maybe no leaderboards and no persistent storage or data or something. So it's kind of like it empowers you to do something that you can get out there.
Right.
But, you know, you want to get more sophisticated, you know, you need to learn how it works and what the edges are. But the reason I mention all this is there's so much new opportunity now to create so much more stuff.
Right.
That's what gets me excited.
And where does Nostr tie into that?
And that's my point. Is like now you've got all kinds of people who want to create new things, and maybe some of those things need that kind of public messaging infrastructure.
Yeah.
Or maybe they want to accept payments and they don't want to deal with how to integrate payments. And they want to maybe just say, I don't know, solve it. And maybe it will figure out that Nostr Wallet Connect is right, as long as it's up on GitHub and it's part of its training data.
Yep.
So in a sense, all of the foundational work that people have done to contribute to make Nostr great is actually important, because without that, it wouldn't even know what Nostr Wallet Connect is, or you know, what is what's the one, the little the knife, the jackknife, or the pocket knife, the little kit that Fiat Jaff built.
Oh, Nostr tools, Nostr utils or something.
Yeah, it's like a little.
I know what you mean.
What do you call the Swiss Army knife kind of thing? I think it's like named that.
Yeah,
it's like a little command line tool that sort of helps you do everything.
Totally.
But effectively, if you didn't have that, there's nothing to train on. So then if you start saying like, do this, it doesn't have anything to learn
or
from. Or
Pablo's Nostr development kit, NDK, stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I think that's really nice. And I think something else that's really interesting is, you know, maybe now, well, this gets into a bigger topic of conversation, which is if the cost of software production is effectively going to zero, where is the value going to accrue in this world? And we have a lot of thoughts around that on the hardware side, but on the software side, or the digital side rather, you know, one area where that value could potentially accrue is to a private key's reputation as one, or like the sort of discovery and reputation system or server or whatever for a group of apps. So I know one thing you've been thinking a lot about is, you know, maybe if you're building games or apps or whatever, and you include in that, you know, hey, I can log in with Nostr. All of a sudden now there's value to the reputation you built up on the Nostr social media side or whatever. If I'm now playing a game and now I can easily, you know, discover my friends or something like that, which, you know, you would not be able to do vibe coding if you needed to access a proprietary API from X or Facebook, because they wouldn't allow you to use that.
Yeah.
Is that one of the use cases you see for people?
Yeah, I mean, think about like, do you know Xbox Live?
From like 20 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, boomer.
Yeah, I know exactly. Now I'm aging myself.
But like, you know, I think any kind of gaming system has a need for like these horizontal pieces.
Right.
So like, you know, identities and leaderboards and payments, and those are common parts of gaming systems, and they always get sort of vertical slices, right? Where, you know, somebody like it's effectively like what the role that Xbox does, and they have a marketplace for discovery of new games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
and they issue your identity.
They issue your identity. Nintendo Switch has the same, you know, similar kind of system. Steam, you know, is the one kind of same functions, like the leaderboards and distribution and payment, and they have identities. They have all of these like meta components. You can like review a game before you buy it and stuff, and then you can see what else did that person review and try to identify. Well, I think we're going to see an explosion of these new kind of casual game designers, like the stuff that Levels.io did with the flight simulator. He's now running a game jam. There's going to be like, I think, dozens of games that come out of that, and maybe hundreds after that. So there's all of this new energy from people who maybe like are programmers but haven't wanted to spend their time kind of professionally doing games, but now they can like easily accomplish a lot as like a side project doing games.
Yeah.
And then there's like people who have no programming experience who have always had an idea for a game. They can now build those. So I think we're going to get like an explosion of games. I think games are like more interesting than vertical SaaS software for the AI age. You know, you could have like an indie hacker could just like kind of come up with something. And so what is all the common infrastructure for that gaming environment? What is the Steam of that environment? And I don't think it's going to be Steam. And I don't think it's going to be Nintendo Switch or Xbox Live. I think it's something new.
Right.
And so if you have all this innovation going, all of these people pushing on what can be, you know, what can be made independent of like ideology. I'm not trying to be censorship resistant or something, or payments oriented. I just want to like make something cool,
Yep.
right? I make something cool. Okay, great. Now that I've got something cool,
I want to use it with people.
use it with people, and I want to kind of like interconnect with everybody else, and maybe Twitter or X kind of helps with that in some ways, but like it's not really built for that.
Yeah.
And maybe Nostr is really like Xbox Live for for the world. So and I'm not saying that's the only or the best thing, but it's just like what I'm excited about is all of the changes that are coming to how software gets built and who builds software and what gets built. That kind of changes opportunity. It smells like opportunity because like you're in fast moving water. Right?
Yeah, and it also, I mean, so games are great. I personally don't play as many games, but I think it's going to be the case for everything, right? Like it's going to be the long tail for, apps, for movies, music, basically like AI driving the cost of software and eventually like second order consequences of that, things like music production, whatever, to zero, means there's going to be like a fattening of the long tail for everything.
Yep. Fattening of the long tail for everything.
Yeah, exactly. There's your clip. But like in that world, like you said, maybe you can depend on X. It's not really built for that. And like, you're always still dependent on the company and like hoping they, let you do it.
And they don't have a payments API.
Well, not yet, not yet. But the beautiful thing you inherit from Nostr is you get, identity that no one's going to like rug on you and take away from you. And you get discoverability, which same thing's going to happen. People can't rug you on that. And you get payments built in via Nostr Wallet Connect, the Lightning Network, all this stuff. So all of a sudden, kind of going back to one of our mutual favorite writers, Kevin Kelly's long tail thesis, like part of his whole thing was 1,000 true fans. And whatever weird field you're in, whether that be music or writing or game development, if you can get to 1,000 true fans, you can quit your job and like that's what you do. I think one really beautiful vision of this AI world is it's like that, but it's a lot easier for everyone to get 1,000 true fans. Maybe it's 10,000 true fans because it's better distribution. And maybe Nostr, like maybe one beautiful vision of Nostr is like it empowers indie everything to get to 1,000 or 10,000, whatever that number is, true fans.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
I love it. I'm here for that.
I'm here for it too. So let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of what actually needs to happen for that. I mean, obviously we don't know exactly the order of what's going to pop off next. I have some ideas of maybe the order things need to get built, but I thought Jack had a great tweet or Nostr post, whatever we're calling it now, Nostr post, a week or so ago, and we talked about it on the show last week. And
on
also
the Presidio Bitcoin Jam show.
Yep.
Okay.
We touch on two things: identity and agents. I want to definitely talk about agents next, but on the identity piece, I actually, Jack was really calling for, we need to, something similar to what I was calling for in my essay, Nostr's Identity for the Internet. We need to really push for using Nostr to log into things. So log in with Nostr, which I think is great. And I think I would love to see that become more of the norm, maybe for some of this long tail stuff. Two questions that come to mind on that. One, three questions. Why haven't we seen a lot of that experimentation yet? Log in with Nostr. I guess we kind of have with apps that, you need to use a browser extension like Albi, Artur and some other people are working on how to do that in a way that allows you to store your key in a secure enclave in the cloud. Maybe that'll solve a lot of it. Two, though, it seems like to me, and I'm not exactly sure what this company would look like, there's probably an opportunity for a company to build something like OAuth to actually say, okay, like you've got the like fundamentals of this login, but we're going to like, take all of the components, figure out some of the, edge cases and make it just like a super simple SDK for developers to enter into their app. I don't think that exists today. Is that what we need next? Or like, how do we go from today, it's like very niche, only a couple sites use not login with Nostr, to like that becoming more of a standard?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little bit like an infrastructure app kind of push and pull, right? There's sort of a chicken and egg to infrastructure and apps. You can't really build good apps unless you have really good infrastructure, and you can't build there's no reason to build great infrastructure unless
you
have
don't
great
have
apps.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we're like, in a sense, a little farther ahead on infrastructure than we are on apps. We have social media clients. That's great. I think people are doing a great job with that. I'm daily user of Primal. I think there's a lot of great clients out there that have done great work. So I think like that use case of apps, we have a lot of good momentum at that, but we don't have a lot of experimentation in the app world. We have a lot of experimentation in the like infrastructure world. Like how do you like host media better, or are there paid models of relays or not? And I think without a lot of good infrastructure, you can't build great apps.
Right.
But I feel like should should people log in with Nostr? Well, I would ask, well, what are they logging into with Nostr?
Right.
And why is it better to log in with Nostr than it is to just log in with whatever other options they have? I feel like it has to be that it's better to log in with Nostr for some reason. Like,
well, so I want to hear that full thought, but just to push back a little bit on the infrastructure, I do think there is there's one critical missing infrastructure piece in my mind, which is log in with Nostr today. If you don't have the browser extension and, that doesn't yet work on like mobile, if you're using Safari or something, the login with Nostr experience up to date has still basically been just paste a private key, which I think is kind of a non-starter.
Yep.
So I do think there's that critical missing piece of infrastructure. Maybe I know Pablo had Insect Bunker, but that was kind of difficult to host.
Right.
I think Arturo is kind of the farthest in thinking along this, but like I do think that the like one critical thing we're missing to be able to even play with this at scale. I mean, I guess we could see more playing at the web, the browser level, because then you could use Albi or some of these other browser extensions. But is like, how do I log in without just like exposing my private key and like risk getting like completely owned?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree. I'm not saying like infrastructure's done, everybody go home, or everybody stop building
over,
infrastructure
guys.
and go build apps instead. It's not like an either or. It's like I think we need both. And I agree with like the point that if we don't have kind of good signing mechanisms that are fairly simple and intuitive, that like people won't be able to use them.
Yeah.
But I also think like there's not enough
demand.
There's not like we haven't seen the apps that really need Nostr yet.
Yeah.
Right? Like we've seen one class of apps that really need Nostr, which is
social media clients.
Social media clients. I think they've really, really great job at those. But in a sense, we haven't seen a lot of creativity outside of that style of app flourish.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like excited about maybe vibe coding is part of how you get like it's just a throwaway. It doesn't matter. I'm just messing around because I think this would be cool. I don't have to like really focus a lot of energy. I can just like drop an idea and get something that's useful. And if one of those things takes off, it wouldn't surprise me if one of them has a need where you can't do this without Nostr.
Totally.
I think if Nostr is just like, you can also log in with Nostr, it's not good. It has to be, this app is great. And the thing I want to do with it, I can't do except that Nostr exists, and Nostr is here to save the day. I can actually finally do this thing. Like I can accept Bitcoin payments in a way that I couldn't before. It's so easy to like let people log in with their Bitcoin wallet or their Nostr identity to find, the people that they want to use this with.
Yep.
But almost, I cannot think of a single app right now where I'm like, oh, this is really exploiting this need for it.
So I actually have a couple ideas on that. I love your point though. Anyone listening to this, if you haven't played with vibe coding,
oh yeah,
maybe the takeaway is like if you have an idea for an app where you think, hey, maybe logging with Nostr because that identity I had to bring with me, the people I get to identify, maybe that's useful. That would be awesome.
And further on that, I'd say if you are interested in vibe coding, and you want to work more on infrastructure oriented stuff, I would say figure out how to help the next wave of people who want to do vibe coding and don't want to try to learn everything about Nostr.
Totally.
We shouldn't say that everybody has to learn everything.
Right.
So if I actually tried doing some Nostr stuff in my vibe coding career.
Yeah.
And I didn't put a ton of effort into it. I tried to play the role of, just like casual, interested, hey, can I do this? And the answer is no, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it can't work. But it's like
as of today,
if you just say like, hey, make a Nostr client that lets me post a thing, it kind of doesn't really, like our friend said, it's like kind of a drunk intern, right? It's like it can do some stuff, but it doesn't always get it right. And so I feel like one thing, somebody who wants to contribute on the infrastructure side could do is help make it so that everybody who opens up Cursor and Claude Sonnet 3.7 and says, make me a app that lets me post a signed message to Nostr, that's just like easy. They just have to prompt it and it works.
Totally.
I feel like if we had that, then we can go to like the next step.
Yep.
Okay. Like,
and what would we need? Like what would that infrastructure look like?
I mean, it may be some set of libraries that the LM can be trained on. It may be that like somebody who just could do a demo video of, hey, I started it and I got through the process and here's what you need to do. Prompt like this. It may be a Cursor rule.
Yep.
And I think you can do this with Windsurf and there's other tools. I think I like vision direction wise what Goose is going after. so I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think simplicity and accessibility is almost like more important than ideology for this. It's got to be just like
so easy.
Somebody
Anyone can
who
do it.
heard about the thing. Replit Agent is actually a very simple, easy to use thing. But like if you pop on Replit Agent, and they just launched V2 today, so I need to go try that out now. But if you pop on Replit Agent and say like, make me a Nostr app where I can sign a message, does that actually work?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, then let's figure out the steps that we need to take to make it work. And then, and sorry, we're getting a ton of chat here, and I did not.
Holy shit!
I did not really pay attention.
Oh wow!
Sorry.
Yeah, we got some commentary.
Oops.
It's like just a random Thursday. Let's go.
Sorry. Let's address this in a second. But to finish the thought, I think we need to figure out how to get somebody end to end who's like a total noob who doesn't really know much about Nostr and just wants to make a Nostr app to be able to vibe code a Nostr app successfully in either Replit Agent or like Cursor. Like that should be table stakes.
Yeah.
And if we get that, and if it's add some Cursor rules or make sure there's a library that the Replit model is trained on or whatever, like some open source GitHub thing that it can just learn from. Like it'll learn from it if it's there, but maybe it was trained a long time ago. I don't know.
Yeah.
But let's make sure that that's easy. And until that's easy, we can't expect that like vibe coders are going to be like trying to dive in and figure out how to use Nostr.
It's a great point. I don't know what the roadblocks are, but if someone is vibe coding and they're like, they want to make a big contribution to Nostr, like figuring out whatever those roadblocks are and just like, okay, whether it's just education, rules, whatever it is. And like the end outcome is, could I bring this to a random 22-year-old that wants to try this? And like, they could actually integrate Nostr. They could integrate Bitcoin payments via Nostr Wallet Connect, and it just works.
And we're doing this. Like I was doing this with a couple friends here at Presidio Bitcoin. We were gathered around the table the other day, looking at Nostr, figuring out how do you do this for Lightning.
Yeah.
And you'd hope that these
That's
things,
also
you'd hope
still
that
hard.
it should be so easy. You should be like, just like make me a thing that can generate an invoice and pay. You think about prompting an LLM. Just like you prompt ChatGPT, but you're expecting software out the other end instead of information, right? So you prompt it and say, hey, make a Lightning invoice that the user can pay, and then whatever gets paid goes to the developer's wallet.
Yeah.
That should be easy. Well, it basically got a lot of the pieces right, but it was like suggesting I use lnpay.co, which when you click on it, you get a 403.
Right.
So I guess it's like dead, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine, but like it's just trained on old stuff.
Right.
So I know enough about what I'm doing, and I wasn't able to get there yet. But then when we sat around and huddled, and I talked to some other people who had other pieces of the puzzle, and we actually got it working.
Yeah.
So yesterday we finally got it working, but it's working in like it requires, it's not a way that we could actually do for the hackathon. So next step is get it in shape where it could be done for the hackathon. So anyway, the same thing I'm saying that's problematic about like we can't so easily make a Nostr app with vibe coding. We can't even make a Lightning app with vibe coding. And everybody's like all these companies, everybody's like, oh, we're doing Stripe for Lightning. We're going to make it so easy to Lightning. But it's like,
Believe
who's
me,
running the node? Is it custodial?
I'm
or
painfully
non-custodial?
aware.
And
having invested
like,
on so many of these. Yeah, we actually had on X, not on Nostr. So some folks may not be over there, but I asked like, hey, DK, how can my buddy DK add Lightning payments into his vibe coding thing? And he's able to do it like easily 5 minutes or less. Yeah. And it was a little bit frustrating because we had half of the industry basically chiming in, and like everyone was like, "Try this." I was like, "Can it just work in 5 minutes?" And the short answer is no. And there were some people like Zebedee does have the custodial licenses, and I think Strike does as well. But there were limitations on each of those. And it looks like even just yesterday, Zebedee shut down in a bunch of countries. It's what I saw in Stacker News. I don't know if that's true. The point is, all custodial services have, for one reason or another, like sadly shuttered. Alby used to be the easiest way to do that. The good news is we are making a lot of progress non-custodially, largely because of Nostr Wallet Connect. And so now you can, via Nostr Wallet Connect, hook up things like your Alby Hub. I think some other things, like I think Lexi's going to add Nostr Wallet Connect. Zeus, which is non-custodial, already has it. Breeze, which has their own system, which is very, I think, close to being able to get what we want non-custodially. Sort of, they use Liquid to swap it out. Anyways, if you want to hear all of that discussion, our last Presidio Bitcoin Jam, we go into painful detail of all that. But the short answer is we're close, but we're not quite there yet. Maybe integration with Nostr via Nostr Wallet Connect can get it a little bit faster, but TBD.
But I think the meta point that I mean agree and endorse, and thank you for actually instigating that whole thread, because that was wonderful for getting an outpouring of people who want to contribute to help this. But for Lightning, I couldn't do it. Lightning's like, I'd say, a more well-developed ecosystem
Yeah.
than Nostr in many ways. But for Nostr, I couldn't do it either.
Yeah.
And I think if we want to make things like technologies like Lightning and Nostr get out to the world, I think we need to spend a lot more of our collective energy trying to like make sure that it's easy for people who mostly don't care.
Yeah.
They're not super ideologically aligned. They don't really care deeply about it, but that
They're willing to try it out.
They're willing to try it because it solves a problem that they have.
Yes.
And they don't have to learn about it. You know, like remember when like Stripe started, it wasn't like, oh, well, thanks. Let me help show you how to set up a merchant account. Cause like, it was just like, here's some JavaScript, drop it in, Yeah,
just drop it, done.
And that's the simplicity we need. And so I think things like custodial or non-custodial, like I may care about that, but a new developer should focus on an experience and not worry about that.
They just want to accept Bitcoin payments.
What about Lightning liquidity or whatever?
Totally.
Nostr Wallet Connect, like what if are you using NSEC Bunker? Is it the right like technical solution because it actually is going to leak your key? Like those are really, really important, but those become like if we say no, you must understand the ideology first.
Yeah.
You actually lose a lot of the creativity because you're like, well, I'm going somewhere else where I don't have to understand all this stuff.
Totally.
And I know everybody's shouting proof of work. You're not, but really,
well, I do think
you shouldn't have to think about a lot of this stuff.
I do think a lot more people really do want it to go mainstream. I will say I know that a lot of the regulatory stuff, at least on the Lightning side, has been very frustrating. But I do think we're getting close. And I think on the Nostr front as well, this is kind of a call to action. Like I think it's a big wake-up call. By the way, if anyone wants to come to the hackathon mid-May, date TBD, but let us know. Think about the random 22-year-old, that has computer savvy, but just wants to try to solve a problem. Like, hey, I just built this indie game. I want to accept a long tail of Bitcoin payments and have like a social identity. Don't really care about the philosophy, but I just kind of want it to work. That's the goal. I want to touch on two more points with this because I know we have a lot of stuff we wanted to cover in a short amount of time. But
we haven't even done the comments.
Oh, yeah, we haven't done the comments.
And thank you, Carnage, for NAC. It's the Nostr Army Knife. Remember I thought it was Swiss Army Knife? It's NAC is the command line
tool. All right, cool. Yes. I didn't even see that one. Carnage, Jesse. Before we join in with the comments, so the two things I wanted to throw out there. One, if I were thinking about apps that need that Nostr identity today, I think there's two big areas I would be looking at. So number one, you said, I don't really know of anything other than social media clients I would click login with Nostr for. The first one for me is things that are Bitcoin adjacent. I am shocked that we still haven't seen local Bitcoins really pop off on Nostr. I know Mostro has kind of been working on it. I think Peach and some others maybe have integrated it, but like that to me is like a very obvious opportunity. You've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Bitcoiners, all of whom, or many of whom would like to use a service like a local Bitcoins, and like the reputation of like, who am I trading with? Of Bitcoiners, if it's like a FUB, for Bitcoiners by Bitcoiners, instead of FUBU, that to me is like a very obvious use case that I'm surprised hasn't seen more attention, and I would love to see get attention. I think Nostr just makes like radical sense there. On top, and then other sort of Bitcoin adjacent things like, if you're buying and selling Lightning liquidity services, like shout out Lightning Network Plus, obviously Amboss, some other guys that are selling things like channels, Lightning Labs, all of those situations, I think probably makes sense. I'd be curious, Jesse, if you're still listening, if you guys have considered doing a login with Nostr. I'm sure that, people that are buying and selling Lightning channels probably on Nostr as well. So those kinds of opportunities make a lot of sense to me. Other areas where maybe you have some arbitrage opportunity, we've talked about things like, soft gambling, let's say. So if you're doing, prediction markets, I hear, when I'm in the sauna now or swimming in the bay, I hear all the like 22-year-old kids like nonstop are now talking about Polymarket. That's very interesting. Yeah. And they're betting on things like which AI model is going to be the best at the end of the month. Like it's going beyond sports. I think something, sort of prediction markets over Nostr with Lightning payments, that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of the Bitcoin community would use that.
Yep.
So those are, I think, some sort of fertile areas that I would be experimenting. The other major area that I would be experimenting in, and this is an area that Jack discussed as well, go back and listen to our last show, something I think we're both getting increasingly excited about is, this idea of self-sovereign, self-evolving agents running around in Nostr. And so the thesis that I'm getting most obsessed about at HiveMind and my fund is, things you can't do without Nostr. Well, and Bitcoin, if I want to have agents that literally are self-evolving and control themselves, that's never in a million years going to work with the traditional payments rails where that can always be shut off. And also, by the way, can't support, like all the kind of crazy payments an AI agent is going to need to do, 1 to millions, 1 to trillions one day, whatever it ends up being. And two, if I need to be able to access data openly, do whatever the hell I want with that data, if, X or Reddit's just going to rate limit me immediately because it sees I'm a bot, that's never going to work. So one thing we've been thinking about with some fellow Nostr collaborators as well is, you now have Nostr identity, the private key, which can now control a fleet of wallets, Bitcoin wallets,
Yep.
via Nostr Wallet Connect. So you've got sort of open and permissionless payments, open and permissionless identity. One thing that we were missing was the ability for, how can you have a secret as an agent? And it looks like with some of the confidential computing stuff we've been talking a lot about, you can now store a private key in a cloud like Amazon with Nitro or some other things that no one else can see. Now, as you start to think about all of these pieces, we need what I'm calling and borrowing from Drew's thinking metabolic pathways, if Bitcoin is the digital ATP, to be able to have the bot buy its own services. So things like the GPUs it needs. And so I think we need a marketplace where I can pay Lightning, hit an NPub, not even, as we talked about yesterday, not even an IP address, be able to spin up my own GPU, ideally with a secure enclave, and through that be able to have self-evolving digital life. Something like that, and I know there's a lot more we can talk about, but to me, this is the most exciting idea I think I've ever heard in my entire life. And this can only exist with Bitcoin and Nostr. So if someone's out there listening for something to build right now, this to me is like, it's also terrifying. I will grant you that. And I hope this doesn't accidentally end up killing us all and making us paper clips. But this is cool. And then, of course, what we talked about in the show is you can then give that guy a goal. The goal we were talking about is, can you have them run eCash mints? Because if they're the ones running the eCash mints, and the only problem we have with all this eCash activity, which is closely coupled with Nostr, is who's going to run the mints? Well, if the AI is going to run the mints, and the AI has a economic directive, survive via running the mints and make money, make Bitcoin specifically like a profitable Bitcoin operation, then pay for your own GPUs, that could solve a major problem for Nostr. So there's a major idea. You can go listen. We talked about it more on our show last week, PBJ, but I know I threw a lot out there, but those are the things I'm excited about.
I feel like I got Lalu over here now.
I know. I got excited. There's so much when you start thinking about this is a substrate for the next phase of evolution of life.
Yeah.
This is so much bigger than just, it's like a little app. It's like, no. Like, this is the opportunity. If this starts working, the rest of the world will have to come over. For better or for worse, either just try and stop this thing, or ideally to create an ecosystem of profitable, cooperative, and collaborative, an ecosystem of agents.
Yeah. I have a friend who for a long time now has always said, like, what if Bitcoin wasn't for us, but it's really made for the machines?
I think it is.
And I think it's also interesting to think about like Nostr in that way. What if Nostr isn't made for us and it's really made for the machines?
Let's fucking go. I like this.
Like it's dovetailing on the same stuff you're saying is like, how do they communicate publicly? How do they discover each other? How do these agents, how do you discover the mints, or how do you build trust or reputation around these eCash mints that are autonomous agents running in some cloud that can move themselves to some other substrate where they can always pay in Bitcoin? And like, how does that work? Well, you need some communication, right? You need to be able to say, hey, I'm here, I'm alive, I can do this.
Yep.
You need some way to be able to verify what code is running. So people need to be able to understand that you're not writing. That's like, Bitcoin's not good at that stuff. Bitcoin's good at settling money.
Yeah.
But Nostr's good at all this other stuff.
And you need a way to control Bitcoin keys and actually be able to receive and send Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think we should try to, at some point, maybe not right now, but at some point we should try to lay out the actual path, the steps that you would need to take. Like, I think yesterday or last Friday on the Presidio Bitcoin Jam, I think it finally clicked for me, at least, that I think we have some of the pieces needed to make this work. Like,
I think we have all the pieces.
Yeah, but I'd like to actually try to map them out as best, because I think there's at least a handful of leaps you need to make. It's not like one leap. Mm-hmm. You need to like figure out what kind of infrastructure is going to run on that can be paid in Bitcoin, and do they need secure enclaves or not? And can you verify what open source code they're running versus like, how do you know if it's closed source? Can they generate their own keys and keep those private? Like, I feel like there's at least a handful of questions that I feel when I talk to smart people about it, I feel like the general sense is like, yes, this can be done.
Right.
Or we seem to be on the brink of being able to do that. But I'd like to really lay it out
step by step,
bit by bit.
And I think we should do that. I'm definitely open to doing some of that now. I'm already kind of cooking a little bit on an essay on this, so I'll share that with you, and maybe you can help me like think through this step by step. I know one of our smart mutual friends thinks he can have this out pretty soon, so stay tuned.
I feel like this has like been sort of the main topic for discussion in the halls at Presidio Bitcoin lately.
Without a doubt. Oh, actually,
everybody's talking about.
2 of our smartphones. One here locally is trying to do something like this now. Another Nostridge.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe after today's conversation, we'll get some more. But, the point is, there are some steps. And by the way, then there's also potential secondary steps. Like, as I mentioned on the Jam last week as well, you may need not only Bitcoin decentralized marketplace, like an open and permissionless cloud for the agents that can be paid in Bitcoin and listed via NPub, but you eventually will also need other physical resources shared digitally, right? So this is my sort of other big call to action is for people building things like, Helium without the shitcoin, i.e. like a bandwidth that you can you maybe have one internet connection, you're selling little pieces of that for sats. And I know someone's already built a demo of that on Nostr today, I think with eCash as well. Forget the name of it, but it's a super cool project. Same thing for storage, Filecoin without the shitcoin, like all those crypto projects. Like eventually, if the AI is going to be able to completely self-replicate and store itself, it's going to need all of those physical resources. And eventually, maybe in the one day, it'll even be able to pay to have other robots or humans build new solar factories and battery deployments. I think that's where we're headed.
And one thing I want to correct is you said for sats, but you haven't heard heard. Steve and I are introducing a new unit bias. We're going to call it Bitcoin.
I'd be very curious to get the full audience for take on this, but sats or Bitcoin.
We agreed. Well, Steve and I agreed, and now you're going to get looped in here.
Oh, I'm getting looped in. Let's see.
Steve and I agreed last Saturday. We went for a ride, and we agreed we're going to call.
Only use Bitcoin.
We're not going to call anything sats. We're going to say Bitcoin. So we're going to be like, hey, send me 500 Bitcoin.
If someone wants to send us 500 Bitcoin right now, I'd be okay with that. Choose whichever unit denomination you wish.
So when you hear it on Presidio Bitcoin Jam, when you hear Steve say, send me 500 Bitcoin, you know what he's talking about.
Yeah, and to be clear, that's a much longer conversation. The gist of it is, though, there is still a lot of unit bias. A lot of people think if they want to buy Bitcoin, they can't. But if Bitcoin were sats, then they could.
Yeah. So we're changing that.
Be the change. Anyways, there's a lot there, but I guess what I would just say is, and by the way, anyone listening to this, this is my most, I would say, active or one of the 2 things I'm most interested in investing in the world. The other one is around solar, which is completely outside of this, but at least related to Nostr. If you're thinking of what can autonomous agents do on a public permissionless cloud with public permissionless payments, that's what I'm most interested in right now.
Yeah. And public permissionless cloud, how do you discover the resources on the cloud? To me, that screams public Nostr public messaging system, right?
Nostr.
So I think we go down these paths that feel comfortable and for good reason, it helps us get started. But I think there's just so many radical directions to take this stuff.
I love the radical.
We're, I think, barely dipping our toe in some of the radical. I think we are now getting some of this energy, but you asked me at the start, and we should wrap soon, I guess, because we're probably almost hitting an hour now.
What time is it? Oh no,
I think we're past 5, aren't we?
Oh no.
Yeah.
Okay, well we may have to do a couple or a follow up, but a couple quick
do you have a couple quick hits, or you want to?
Well, go ahead with yours first, but.
Well, geez, what was I thought I was kind of in a little bit of a wrap.
Oh, well, the last thing that I wanted to talk about, so we're definitely not going to get to talk about the energy piece today. That's a whole lot.
And you got a separate pod coming out about the energy thing, right?
Hopefully, it's been.
We didn't record that yet.
It hasn't been recorded yet, but we're rescheduling it. I have another sort of essay. I've got a lot of essays cooking in my head right now, but I have I think. Well, and maybe this is actually interesting worth talking about as a final topic. So not exactly related to Nostr, but one major question, and I even saw someone in the chat. Thank you guys also for coming to the chat. We'll have to, be more audience engaged next time. But someone made a great point of look, the whole point of Nostr is cuts out the middlemen. There is no room for VCs and stuff. And I think, that's largely true. I mean, at least on a long enough time horizon, there's always going to be ways to make money. And, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that 100%, but directionally, I definitely agree. And, it got me thinking about a topic we're going to discuss more tomorrow, which is this Balaji thread where he was discussing if China basically open sources everything and drives the cost of intelligence effectively to zero, then, and that's kind of what we're seeing already around the world. And Nostr helps cut out middlemen, driving marketplace fees to zero. Other things are going to be very similar. Then, one view of the world is we go into this kind of happy utopia where we have infinite abundance, and directionally, I actually think some of that's true. But there's still going to be scarcity, right? There's going to be scarcity of attention, as Gigi is always explained very eloquently. But also, there's other kinds of scarcity, right? Like, even though I think energy is going to go almost free, asymptotic with zero, I think it never actually touches zero. And so the gist of his whole Twitter thread, which was very provocative, and we'll go more detail tomorrow, but is basically China going to commoditize the complement, drive the cost of all digital resources and software to zero, and basically just win because they can dominate on hardware. That got us talking a little bit about, in that world where you have agents acting on your behalf and everything digital is basically free, who ends up profiting? Well, the people running the compute. And we talked about Apple being well positioned. If you have, an open source agent that orchestrates for you, Google being potentially well positioned with Android, Apple with iOS. Maybe there's an opportunity for, an open source Nostr based operating system as well, with, app stores like Zap Store and things like that. But maybe just high level, where is your head at as you see the world changing this way? Where do you see value capture and like potential scarcity flowing?
I mean, I think the idea that software is going to get kind of commoditized and pushed to zero seems, I think it people have sort of made the guess many times before and it's never happened. Everybody, it was a big, I think 20, 25 years ago, everybody said like all software is going to get built overseas and, there's no kind of software to be built in the US anymore. And it's all going to get kind of commoditized.
And that's been not true.
Been not true so far. But I mean, I think we're in a kind of a hyper competitive global world now where like a new breakthrough happens in AI and it's for the benefit of humanity. Everybody gets it all at once and then everybody copies it and redoes it.
Yeah.
So, I'm not gonna call it as all to zero, but it does seem, I'm gonna just drop this thing down. It does seem like this is going toward, something like cheap. It's going to be really cheap for a lot of software, and a lot of it is going to get kind of replicated many times over. So, I mean, the hardware is like, yes, the consumer hardware probably is going to be a place where there's still a lot of value to be captured, and I think Google and Apple probably control a lot of that. But then the data centers, I think, are the other big one.
Yep.
Like, it's just going to get pushed down. Like, if you've got really great metal in operations and really great power and cooling, and like, it's like the physical world things are going to become way more how you differentiate. And you don't differentiate by a huge bit, but it's kind of at the margin. Yeah. You just run a little more efficiently, and you can eke out gains that serve billions of people. But it's not like necessarily a sophisticated software kind of idea that used to be the way you'd capture. It still could be opportunities there for sure. I wouldn't discount it, but I think we haven't yet seen what those would look like in an AI world.
Yeah,
I think if and when they come, it'll be because there's some interesting data set that gets sort of discovered or surfaced, and somebody's able to sort of build something that sort of uniquely serves that data set.
Yeah.
But I think it is going to be hardware. I think we're moving to an extremely competitive world, and it's if the hardware in your hand or the hardware that you connect with in the cloud, I think those are going to be the points that for better or worse, those become kind of the control points. So like as we're thinking about building new software networks, let's think about let's be aware of those as potential control points and how we're able to root around them and not be too captured by them.
Or use them to our advantage. So a couple of things I've been thinking about is in this new world, and very relevant for Nostr creators, both developers and otherwise, a couple of points that I can see being good for value creation and capture. One is the creator themselves, right? So attention is always going to be scarce. So this is the good news for people that do get very good with AI tools, whether that's for vibe coding or making music or whatever, or podcasting. If you have the ability to make something interesting that people want to watch, like human attention, or maybe you could even like become a bot entertainer one day. I don't know what that's going to look like, but like if you're performing in some way, shape, or form, or building something that people or bots that own the Bitcoin want, and you can provide them either a service or entertainment or something that they want to pay you still with their attention. To be clear, even in the world of Bitcoin, attention is still a currency, and it's ultimately the most valuable one because we don't know any way to create more attention. And so in that world, I still think people that are just, and I think that's an awesome thing, right? Like maybe in that world, like maybe the indie musician is one of like the biggest value captures, which is awesome if they have a big fan base.
Yeah, I'd love to see it go to the creatives.
Go to the creatives, man. That would be sick. The other thing I was going to say though is, as you think about, building for Nostr, I do think there are some advantages, or maybe disadvantages. We can make advantages. One is when you think about hardware, it's going to be absolutely like just ruthless on cost for the major clouds. But maybe there's even an opportunity, you don't necessarily have to be to AWS if you're building a peer-to-peer marketplace of this kind of super cloud that we're talking about, a Nostr-based cloud, because the value add that you're giving there, and I'm thinking a lot of more, if we're able to, we've been chatting about this, basically have tons of like off-grid miners and servers connected to solar farms that are completely off-grid with batteries or whatever. In that world, if you need to let your like you'll have kind of like the controlled Chinese model of like, you get really cheap, awesome stuff, but like you're limited in what you can do in your thought. Meanwhile, in the Nostr world, I could even see a world where those data centers are a little bit more expensive, but people are more than happy to pay that if they can let their free thought, ideas, content, ideally, if that ends up winning out, then the costs come down as well. But, and like autonomous agents roam. So I think that's one area for us to be thinking about. Another thing that I would love to see is if it really does come down to hardware, I don't know who would be able to do this. I know some people with a lot of resources have looked into it and said not yet, maybe not ever, but I would truly love to see some, at this moment when there's like a big shift in how the world works, it would be awesome if there was open hardware, and people I know have thought about how could we build a phone that's Nostr based, or I don't know, maybe that's not even the right form factor. Maybe it's just like a little microphone that like allows me to like chat with my agent, or a little earbud.
Right.
But that I think is a really big idea. It hasn't seemed, at least from my vantage point and other people I respect's vantage point, cost effective to do yet. But I think the ultimate win there is probably the biggest win.
Yeah, I mean, once we have robotics and manufacturing, like the cost of that will come down. So I think everything's up for grabs. It's a fun time.
Free for all, baby.
We should, we have had so much engagement in the chat, and we have not.
Let's take a look at it.
Let's give shout outs and talk through some of this, just because we appreciate all of the engagement in chats, and we're kind of getting used to using all these tools in the studio and stuff. So Presidio Bitcoin, shout out Nostr News. Thank you. Coming from Nostr, Zapstream would be dope. Yes, indeed.
You are in fact correct. And hopefully next time
we will get that going.
We'll get it going for
sure.
All
right. And Blossom servers are super legit.
We
shout
love
out
Blossom.
to the Blossom servers.
Yeah.
Okay. Structure of Nostr is beautiful, and it strongly appeals to idealistic engineer types that want a better future. It's been hard to communicate it as an investable tech space, though. Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, it's all new. Anything new is anything that can be big. Kind of has to start a little small and a little weird and at the edges. So
and I think that's one thing we're hoping to do here at Presidio Bitcoin is to try and get some of the mainstream tech community to at least see this opportunity and maybe start thinking about where there's some value capture as well. Obviously, I was saying the guy earlier saying Nostr is not for the VCs, network by the people for the people. I do agree with that, but
despite
I still
being a VC,
I'm a VC, but I'm a solo VC.
Your friendly VC.
I'm your friendly
your
VC.
Shitcoin VC.
No, but I also I love this stuff, right? I am one of the plebs, definitely for sure. And I don't think they're necessarily at odds. I think we can have a people's network that also has opportunities that have major financial returns. I don't think that's necessarily at odds. It's at odds if it's like advertising and mind capture, which I'm super against. But Knack, thank you, Carnage.
Thank you, Carnage. And Carnage has been contributing. I saw it later. We'll get to it in the chat.
We haven't seen Insects because it's still super clunky.
Super clunky.
Agreed. We need
Bunker
that.
would be perfect. It was easier to host. Agreed. You now need to log in with Nostr to be Ghibli'd.
Ooh, that would be big.
When are we going to Ghibli the podcast?
Jesse, maybe you can vibe code that for us.
Honestly, paywall DMs would be incredible for Nostr. I agree.
Yeah.
Like, like the ability to access somebody through payment that's a real one. People have been trying it.
Bology at earn.com like 10 years ago, right? It's a great idea that someone should totally try that startup.
And I think the main thing is you want pay.com, right? Not earn.com. Because everybody wants to earn, but who wants to pay is my question. Right? So who is going to pay for access? I think there are people who will pay for access to DM other people.
I mean, I think LinkedIn has kind of built a business around this, right?
Yeah.
So.
But I think we need to think a lot about who's getting enough value that they find it interesting to pay.
Yeah.
Well,
for one thing, if we had a lot of creators, right, people that fans want to reach out to their favorite musicians and stuff like that, I could see that as a starting point.
BTC Plebs is BTC for Plebs is shouting out to Jesse for that's a great idea for the paywall DMs. No login with Nostr to Amboss at this time. Got limit product development to revenue drivers.
That means it's coming 2 weeks as well.
And yeah, I was gonna shout out Carnage. So Carnage, I have noticed on Nostr. I've been watching his stuff, and he's been vibe coding. So he said, I've been vibe coding with V0. That's the Vercel product. And the biggest issues are always with NDK, just getting V0 to subscribe to events and connect to relays. If someone solved this one piece, we'd be golden.
That seems like real alpha right
so
there.
That feels like the thing. Like if somebody could solve the one piece.
How do you solve that? Carnage, if you're still listening and you have ideas on like what could be done.
This reminds me, this is a little bit of what we dealt with in the Lightning thing. So in Lightning, when you send a payment, you have to kind of poll to check if the payment has been received.
Yeah.
And so the hardest part of what we did yesterday to get Lightning to work in a vibe coding environment was just to like set up, I think you can either use like web sockets or polling. And I think we set up a polling solution.
So if we, by the way, Pablo, I believe, is the main author of NDK, we should just like send him this segment. Pablo, if you happen to be listening, great. If not, hopefully we'll send this to you and get to listen. If you can solve Carnage's one problem, maybe you are the big unlock for.
But I think that's right. So Carnage, if everybody hasn't followed, is a designer who does a lot of the design work in Nostr.
Carnage is a real one. He's been here forever.
Has been here forever and has been vibe coding actively. If you watch his recent notes, it's all vibe coding related stuff.
Cool.
So
I'll have to check it out.
In a sense, he's your customer, right? Like go solve
I love it.
What he wants to make it easy for him, and then you probably unlock it for thousands of people.
Yeah.
Right.
And Carnage, it might be worth, if you haven't already, kind of expressed this as a note on Nostr, explaining exactly what your problem has been, like in as much detail as possible. And like, I'm sure with you and others, get this in front of the right people, and maybe it's something pretty easily solvable. In which case, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think somebody just has to care.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. Doesn't require a huge breakthrough. Somebody just has to like grind through it and care about it.
Cool.
And then show us what the answer is. Because I tried a little bit. I didn't grind through it yet.
eCache is a whole monster.
eCache is a whole monster, true.
Why, yes, it is.
Jesse says no, David. Sats. So
you're going to have some difficulty here.
We'll have to, well, I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe we'll have to see what
this one's up for debate.
Say. Yeah,
this one's up for debate.
The mind sees what it chooses to see. Yeah. Freestyle rap. All right. What you got?
Yeah. Yo, check 1, 2. This ain't a freestyle. Should I drop some? I think I've dropped something in the past. By the way, DK did help me. He set up, if you guys have seen Sway in the Morning, that's kind of what's inspired here. We did get a little Cypher Paro, but yeah, I'll rap a little something for you. Yo, it's been a minute since I've been on the mic. Now, watch out before I drop your ass like a box of Mike and Ike's. Oh shit, I didn't mean to hop on the trike. I took off the training wheels. Check me out. And then off came the heels. That's what I was talking about. Now look, if I'm gonna scream, then you gonna shout. I'm walking out on the highway trying to do things my way, but actually what I'm trying to do is say that it's the day that we break free. Nostr, let's go.
All right.
We can do a lot more of that.
Send the Bitcoin over this way.
Oh yeah. If we get if we get a beat. By the way, I still want to see something where Stemster, what those guys are working on, easy to make songs. We'll get some beats up in the studio. Hopefully, I'll start releasing again.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. So Carnage is saying that changing units from Sats to Bitcoin, that Satoshi was for this idea. I didn't realize that.
Huh? I didn't either.
Steve was selling it as his idea.
Sounds like someone is a little bit idea thief. Ideas are free. Intellectual property is crap.
Okay. Price approaches the marginal cost of production. This is from Jesse Schrader.
Agreed.
Approaches the cost of energy and generalized compute. Yeah.
Definitely.
We approach the 1 nanometer silicon designs. That price for marginal cost will get closer to the cost of production, silicon dominance. Ghibli, this podcast, all worthwhile considerations. I would agree. And is Carnage lolling at your rap? I think.
I don't know.
Bitnax. Is that knack the Nostr army knife?
Oh, maybe.
Or is that something else?
I don't know.
Okay. Anyway,
Bitnax,
Jesse gave you some claps too. So claps. Bitcoin would be better, or Sats if that's what Jesse prefers. Whatever you want to send Max. He likes the claps, but he really appreciates the Bitcoin.
Especially if we're using the old nomenclature. I wouldn't mind a full Bitcoin. That'd be cool.
Okay. Well, this was fun. Let's
fun.
wrap on this. We should do more of this kind of stuff.
Agreed.
Right? Because we've been just sort of like the production process. We've sort of been out of sync on our jams. We should do more Nostr focused stuff.
Agreed.
But also, we do touch on Nostr stuff
a lot
on our Friday live stream. So Friday noon Pacific, we do Presidio Bitcoin Jam. Recorded out of Presidio Bitcoin.
We see Jesse there sometimes.
We see Jesse. Yep.
Yeah.
So.
And hopefully we'll have it in the next, hopefully by tomorrow, but if not by next week, we'll have it on zap.stream. So
Yep.
it'll be a lot easier for people to access on Nostr. Yeah, and if you like it, send us Bitcoin of all varieties.
All varieties.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Cool.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Out.